I'm Adam.
I am Paul.
We're from Plugged In, and this is The Dark Knight.
The Dark Knight.
So,
Oh, we're diving right in.
we're going straight in.
Straight in.
We're in.
Here we go.
And here we go.
We're in.
Brum, brum, brum.
So we're going to talk about,
Look at this.
you know, I would have called
Can
it
you see
out
that?
eventually.
Yeah.
Mine are
Oh,
normal.
they're lame.
I don't feel like we had to be that negative straight out of the chute here, Paul, but
have
I guess
lame
we are
socks.
professional critics for Plugged In, and now Paul's critiquing my socks.
Yeah.
We haven't even started yet, Paul, but Dark Knight. I
Dark
think
Knight.
probably the most influential superhero movie ever, probably the best Batman movie ever, and probably in some ways one of the darkest movies in this genre
Oh my goodness.
ever. I think we have a lot to talk about, and that's what
We really
we're
do.
doing here. We want to dive into these movies and really just sort of unpack the themes. And spoiler warning slash alert, Paul's written a book on Batman, so
Yeah.
I mean, get some popcorn. We could be here a while.
Well, and we
Paul,
also,
start talking now.
We also should probably let our viewers know
Yes.
that the movies that we talk about in this space are not necessarily plugged-in friendly movies, right? These are not necessarily.
And there's that one scene with the Joker. It's not
Yeah,
plugged
yeah,
in
yeah,
friendly
not-
at all.
When we start talking about the pencil, that is not the type of scene that is plugged in friendly.
No.
Right? But we want to go a little bit deeper with these movies and explore some of the themes for the adults in our audience.
Yeah.
Would it be fair to say?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and be sure before you actually watch these movies, go to pluggedin.com, read the full review because that's what they're there for.
So Paul is a Batman super fan. Paul knows about Batman lore, I think it is safe to say. And I think that it's also safe to say that what Christopher Nolan did with The Dark Knight was probably as transformative as anything we saw since The Dark Knight graphic novel came out in the 1980s. What,
Yeah.
1986, I think?
1986, yes, that is correct.
And this was an attempt to take a character that up to that time had been what we think of as a kid's comic book character. I mean, we can talk about Adam
Right.
West and some of the subversive things that
yeah.
happened on the 60s show because it was there. But I think really before, and I'm talking about 1986, comic books were largely seen as a child's
things, yes.
medium. And then it became something different. And all of a sudden there was a new understanding of how we could use superheroes to tell these stories. And then Christopher Nolan came and reset the whole game for everybody
Yeah,
in 2000. Well, Batman Begins came out before that,
2005, I believe.
but I
Batman
think
Begins.
that
Yeah.
really Dark Knight was a seminal moment.
Well, The Dark Knight was a seminal moment because it came out, it was 2008. It came out, I think, the same year that Iron Man came out. So these were two huge properties. We know kind of what became of Iron Man and the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It became this sprawling, multi-decade, 23 movie encapsulation up until Endgame, and then it sort of went off the
then
rails.
off
But
the
we'll
rails.
talk about that later. But when you're talking about The Dark Knight, it really did reset the bar as far as what a superhero movie could be. Christopher Nolan was already well known for a lot of his movies. He did Memento. He did a lot of really spectacular kind of sci-fi things that felt very grounded, very chilly in a way. I think would be the vibe of.
He's
Christopher
very
Nolan.
heady.
He's very heady. And The Dark Knight was, I think, maybe, it's definitely the best superhero movie, I think. It may be the
I'm
best
going to agree with you on that.
of
I
Christopher
mean, it
Nolan's
pains me to
movies.
do that, but I
Yeah,
will.
I think it's better than Oppenheimer. I'll be honest with you.
Oh, I think it's the best thing he's done.
Yeah.
And I think it's the best thing he's done in part because of who's in it.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah. So
Christian
you've got
Bale.
Christian Bale,
and
Michael Caine,
Heath Ledger.
Gary Oldman, Heath Ledger, who won an Oscar for this, Morgan Freeman,
Maggie Gyllenhaal.
Maggie Gyllenhaal. So you have 5 guys on that list who have
one girl.
all won Oscars. Maggie Gyllenhaal has not won an Oscar. as
Got
far
it.
as
My
I know.
bad.
So yeah, it was a big deal, right? And a lot of these people, Christian Bale was obviously Batman. Heath Ledger had a huge part to play, but a lot of these guys came in with those thespian bona fides.
Did you just say thespian bona
Yes,
fides?
I did. Yes, I did.
That is impressive.
And
What does
they
that even
did-
mean? They're
They're
good
really-
actors.
It
That's
means
what
they're
it means.
really good actors, and they're known for their acting, right? And they really embodied these supporting actor roles,
Yeah.
you know. And I think that brought a sense of gravitas to this movie that wouldn't have necessarily been there.
So, two-part question. I
Yes.
want to ask you a question. Two-part.
All right.
How is it a superhero movie and how is it not a superhero movie?
Oh, that's a really great question.
you.
2-part question. It is a superhero movie because it, of course, deals with Batman, right? And it deals
Batman.
with it deals with Batman's ultimate arch enemy, the Joker. So it has everything you would expect from a superhero movie. It has the capes. It has the Batmobile. It has these
The
fantastic
baby Batmobile that breaks out of the big Batmobile.
I love
So
that.
great.
So great. So great. We could go on all.
Give me one of those, please, with
No
the
doubt.
guns. Thank
And
you.
I'm
Sorry.
just going to go on a tangent on your question because one of the things that I love about all these Batman movies, they do a different Batmobile in every single one, and every single one is super, super cool.
And it's almost a little bit of Batman meets, 007.
Yeah.
With the gadgetry.
Well, and it's interesting because when
We'll have to talk about Quantum of Solace later.
Yeah, and there's actually some homages to 007 James Bond movies within the Dark Knight, as a
Yeah.
matter of fact. But to get back to your question,
So we got the trappings.
so we've got the trappings, but when you're talking about how it's not a superhero movie, this really feels like a very gritty crime, and it's a thriller.
Right.
It is a thriller. It's a crime-based thriller. No one has superpowers. They do dress up pretty outlandishly, but this is a very grounded story. It feels very like for a person who doesn't like superhero movies, this is a fantastic one to see because it works just as that crime thriller as well.
But only after you read the full review.
Only
And
after
now back
you
to
read
you, Paul.
the full review. Actually, I'm done with that point.
Okay.
That's the thing about Christopher Nolan's movies, I think. We are coming off of, Christopher Nolan had done Batman Begins earlier, and that, of course, was sort of, that did feel more like a superhero movie. Before that, we had Tim Burton's Batman, which was straight comic book, and all the terrible movies that Tim Burton didn't do within that series. There were 4 movies. 2 of them were terrible. But
Batman and Robin.
oh my goodness, man. That's another show. But
If you liked George Clooney as Batman, leave a comment below.
Why are all the gorgeous ones homicidal maniacs? Is it me?
so you had sort of this, to your point earlier, you really did have this comic book vibe to everything that was going on. And Christopher Nolan broke these superheroes out of that comic book world and brought them into the real world in a very real, literal way.
I think one of the reasons why Dark Knight is so resonant is when you're watching it, it's doing both of those things simultaneously, right?
Right, absolutely.
So obviously it's a guy in a suit, and we know he can do cool things, and he has really great cars. The Lamborghini is awesome.
Oh, the Lamborghini is so
I'll take the Lamborghini, please.
No, not over the Batmobile.
But you also have crime. You have politics. You have corruption. You have a bunch of issues that are real world issues.
Yeah.
And I think it was filmed in Chicago.
Most of it was, yes.
It certainly, if it's not Chicago, it certainly was a city that looked like Chicago.
No, I think most of it was filmed in Chicago.
And so there's a Veritas kind of feel to it, right? It's
Yeah.
like, oh, this is like the real world and if this guy lived here? And what do we do when it seems like the bad guys are going to win, right? I mean, that's one of the core questions here, wouldn't you say?
It is a huge core question. And one of the things is, as I was rewatching the movie for this particular conversation, one of the things that occurred to me is just how often when you're a mountain climber, you have what you call these false summits, right? You climb and you get to this point and you think, oh, I'm at the top, and then you look and there's still more mountain to go.
Right.
That's
and then you look
almost-
up and Paul's above you. It's so annoying.
So annoying. But you have sort of these false summit type of things where you think, oh, the good guys are going to do this.
Yeah.
And then the Joker, because of his duplicity, because of his deviousness, has managed to finagle a way around it. And oftentimes it's exactly what he wanted to happen all the time. You have these moments of false celebration that lead to incredible despondency, incredible despair, where you just think, you really do have this question. Can good win?
Yeah.
Can we get out of this without completely selling out on everything we believe in?
So, Paul, you mentioned that the Joker is sort of like the uber nemesis of Batman.
Yes,
You know, he's
yeah.
the guy at the end of the day. No matter who Batman fights, it's always the Joker, right? So,
It sometimes
what's
feels
going
that way.
on in this movie? What's the
Yeah,
plot here?
so essentially what we have in the Batman Begins, we see sort of the creation of Batman and his desire to help Gotham City clean up. There's a bunch of criminals, obviously, that have to be taken care of. And so Batman becomes sort of that symbol of law and order in a city that doesn't have much of that.
In a world.
Ironically, he does outside the body of law and order. And so that becomes sort of a tension point throughout the entire Batman story. But in The Dark Knight, we are introduced to a strange new supervillain. Before this, we really have just seen crooks and criminals. The Joker is something different. And there is an element to this movie where if it hadn't been for Batman, Joker wouldn't have been there either. He becomes a different sort of, he even says in the movie,
This town deserves a better class of criminal. And I'm gonna give it to him.
you know, and so you have this new character who comes in who no one knows what to deal with. Even the crooks don't even know what to deal with him
Because he doesn't play by the rules.
because he doesn't play by the rules.
And even the
There
crooks
are
have
no
rules.
Exactly. He points that out specifically. He is out to banish all rules. And so you have this mad dog on the loose. He refers to himself even as a mad dog. And Batman and everybody else is trying to figure out how to get him under control. And you know, also break up this big old money laundering scheme as well.
Right.
So
One of the scenes I love is that Batman is really trying to delve into the psychology. You know, he's trying to figure out what makes the Joker tick. Because he feels like if he
Yep.
can find
Yep.
what his motivation is, he can find a pain point to give him some leverage on dealing with him. And Alfred essentially says, what if nothing makes him tick? You know, this is a movie that I think really dives into nihilism, right? In terms of
the Joker's character.
in terms
yeah.
of the Joker's character, what makes him tick is that he wants to undermine what makes everybody else tick.
Right.
And almost like an experiment.
He
right?
wants to tear down pretty much the fabric of society.
Right.
You know, and
Just 'cause.
in that scene, you know, you have Alfred talking about how when he was in the army, they were marching through the jungles of Burma, and they
Yeah.
had to deal with this crazy guy. And they found out that he had stolen a whole bunch of gems, and he had the bad guy that Alfred's talking about had been giving these gems away to kids because he didn't care about it. And he looks at Bruce Wayne and he says, "Some people just want to watch the world burn."
Some men aren't looking for anything logical, like money. They can't be bought, bullied, reasoned, or negotiated with. Some men just want to watch the world burn.
Yeah.
And that is such a memorable quote. You see, to get to your point, there's this fantastic scene within sort of the Gotham police station,
Yeah.
and you have Batman kind of wailing on the Joker. And Batman's losing control, which is another theme. You have people losing control
Yes.
all the time because of this unfamiliar, impossible to sort of throttle in threat. And the Joker, in the middle of that beatdown, he is laughing and he says, "You have nothing you can threaten me with. Nothing." And when you have someone who truly has nothing to lose, who is truly willing to let the world burn and himself with it, how do you deal with that?
Yeah.
The Joker says, and Batman comes to believe in some ways, that he has to break his one rule.
Oh, then that's the rule you'll have to break to know the truth.
And for those who are not familiar with Batman, that one rule is he never, ever kills. That is how you deal with a character like the Joker. So how does this incorruptible, I will never kill Batman, deal with this guy who it seems like can be only dealt with in that way?
Well, and one of the Joker's sort of operational principles is everybody has a threshold, right? At some level,
Right.
something will make everybody a bad guy. And Joker likes to just sort of wander around and light metaphorical dynamite or sometimes real dynamite and just toss it in.
Right.
And we've got Harvey Dent, who Joker pushes him past his threshold.
Harvey Dent, the incorruptible district attorney, he is the White Knight of Gotham City. He is referred to that over and over. And even Bruce Wayne Batman says he is the best of us, the
Yeah.
incorruptible White Knight. And that is one of the most painful story arcs. In honestly a movie filled with painful story arcs.
Boy.
The arc of Harvey Dent's story from this good crusading guy who truly wants to clean up Gotham
Yep.
into the character that he becomes.
Yes.
It's incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And you see elements of that all throughout. You see the Joker pushing, even before Harvey Dent makes his big transformation.
Yeah.
You see Dent lose his cool.
Yep.
You see Batman lose his cool. You see the frustration on Commissioner Gordon's face trying to deal with this threat. It's a reminder to get to kind of what Plugged In is all about. We really like to talk about movies and think about the spiritual components within these movies, right?
Right.
When we talk about that theme, the idea that everybody can be corrupted,
Yes.
that's very biblical.
Yeah.
You know, we are all sinners. We all have the ability to fall. And we see that sinful nature within the characters that we meet. We see that sense of desiring to do the right thing, but being pushed to a certain point.
Well, and I think part of the interesting thing about the movie is it asks the question, if it seems like evil's going to win, is there any point in trying to be good? I mean, we really watched
Yeah.
Bruce Wayne have a crisis of faith, right? And I'm trying
I think that's fair.
I'm trying so hard to do the right thing, but there's this guy, right? And one of Joker's other operating principles is civilization is a thin veneer. And if you can poke the right buttons, it comes off for everybody. And he sort of says, at the end of the day, we're all out for ourselves. We will all try to survive. And we all may do really evil things.
Their
And-
morality is a bad joke.
yeah, and he is sort of, I think, deconstructing the idea of morality, the idea of right and wrong, and in that gap is Bruce Wayne as Batman trying to stand up and say, no,
Yeah.
you're wrong, but Joker gets perilously close to causing Bruce Wayne to lose
Yeah.
his faith, wouldn't you say?
I would say. And let me go on a tangent just for the character of Batman. And one of the reasons why he resonates so strongly with me. You know, when you look at superheroes throughout, all these superhero movies, you have certain ones who feel better than us. You
Right,
have
Superman.
Superman.
Boring. Just saying.
And you have these truly amazingly principled figures. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Captain America would represent that. Batman, he comes in without any superpowers, number one, but he has some really serious problems. And as you hear him actually say, someone who dresses up as a bat has some issues.
Well, a guy dresses up like a bat clearly has issues.
Right? And you see.
What about bat socks?
Let's not talk.
Do you
about
have
it.
issues, Paul?
No, I have no issues. I'm fine. Thank you.
All right, I just wanted to get that on record. I have lame socks, so
You do have
I got
lame
no
socks.
issues at all. Anyway,
But
back to the
but
point.
you have this person. He is very literally a real person. Well, not literally a real person, but he is a human. He does not have superpowers. He's not this demigod-like person.
Right.
He is very wealthy.
Right.
But he is very mortal, and he has all the mortal weaknesses that we do, both physically and mentally and emotionally.
Yeah.
You see him throughout his history, I think it would be fair to say, grapple with the badness all around him. And the thing that I love about him is that he gets up every day and he tries to do the right thing. He doesn't do it
Which is what we do
perfectly.
at Plugged In, by the way.
He doesn't
Pluggedin.com.
He doesn't do it perfectly. There are times when he fails. There are times when he is weak.
Yeah.
But every day, every night, he tries to go out there and make his corner of the world a little better.
And one of the interesting sort of ethical subplots is that Batman wires together this contraption that enables him to use all
Spoiler warning.
of the cell phones out there
Yes.
to gather information. And Lucius Fox, who's played by Morgan Freeman, is sort of his tech guru, basically says this is wrong. And it begs the question, how far is too far when we're trying to do the right thing the wrong way?
Right.
And Lucius basically says, as long as you're doing this, I can't keep working for you.
I will help you this one time,
Yep.
and he says, I will resign after this.
I'll help you this one time. But consider this my resignation.
You consider this
And that's
my
an interesting
resignation.
question
Yeah.
because the technology is pretty important in the way the plot plays out. And I think Nolan doesn't resolve the tension.
No.
Which is one of the things that I appreciate about the way he makes movies is movies are good at asking questions and he resists the urge to give us a neat ending.
I love that. And I love that about this movie, even though it makes it a very difficult movie in places
And I don't like
to
the ending,
watch.
by the way. We can get to that in a
Yeah,
bit.
it's a really difficult movie in some ways to watch because of these elements, right? You don't have that pure goodness that we would like to see.
Right.
In Wonder Woman in 2017, I believe,
Right.
she became this paragon of goodness, and she stuck with her principles. The Dark Knight challenges that to the nth degree. It
Yeah.
says how far, just like what you were saying, how far can you push this? How far can you push to catch the bad guy without becoming a bad guy yourself? And you hear this quote all the time. You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And that's almost sort of the undercurrent of this entire movie.
Well, and in the end, Harvey Dent makes some horrible choices and becomes essentially a villain as well, Two-Face.
Yeah.
But they want to preserve the memory of him as a good guy.
Right.
And Batman makes this sacrificial choice to basically take the blame for some things that have happened, to lie for the sake of protecting Gotham. He becomes almost a scapegoat in a biblical kind of way, right?
Yes. I was going to talk about that. It is very much a scapegoat type of figure, where you have, at the end, and you see this coming about. You see elements of this pointing to where this is going to go. Alfred at one time talks to Bruce Wayne saying, what would you have me do, Alfred? Bruce Wayne asks.
Yeah.
And Alfred says, endure, take it, They will hate you for it, but that's what Batman is about.
Endure, Master Wayne. Take it. They'll hate you for it, but that's the point of Batman. He can be the outcast. He can make the choice that no one else can make. The right choice.
He can become that scapegoat. He can become that conduit to keep the rest of the city clean. And I had sort of an interesting reaction this time when I watched it, because that is a really troubling thing. I don't like the idea of lying.
Right.
To preserve someone's character.
Well, and it
We
gets
are
back
not
to the
about
ethical
lying.
thing. Like,
Exactly.
if you have to do something unethical
Right.
for a greater
Right.
good, that there's huge tension there.
But when you talk about that biblical scapegoat, I found that really interesting this time around because Batman essentially says, I did those horrible things that Two-Face actually did. I can
Right.
be that guy. You can chase me. I am guilty. And that is very much like the scapegoat.
Yeah.
But when you think about
And then he runs off with dogs chasing him.
that's
Literally.
exactly right. There's a lot of dogs in this movie, which I find pretty
A lot of
interesting
dogs.
too.
What do you make of that? I guess we'll come back to that.
We'll come back to that. But you have this scapegoat character, and when you think about it as a Christian, we have the sins in our lives are real, right? But when Christ died to take those sins away, he literally lifted those sins from us, washing us clean, allowing us to be pure, like Batman allows Dent to be pure.
Yeah, he exonerates him.
He exonerates him. He cleans his record. He cleans that slate. And in a way,
And takes his sin on him.
and takes his sin on him. He becomes the guilty party. Obviously, this isn't a tit for tat, look at Christian ethics or theology, but I find that echo of Christianity really, really powerful. That idea of taking on someone's sin to allow this person. When we talk about our own sin, that's what gets in the way of our relationship with God, right? And so we need to have that sin wiped away so that we can be in communion with God. That is what Batman does in a way for Dent.
Metaphorically.
Metaphorically.
Well, and actually, really, for Dent.
Because that's who Dent needed to be in community with his city, to be that hero that his city needed him to be.
So it's interesting. When I saw this the first time, I think I saw it twice in 2008, and I haven't seen it since then. My recollection of it was as being shockingly violent.
Yeah.
I found myself not quite as moved by that this time, but I think it's safe to say a lot of the darkness here has to do with the violence, and I think we need to say something about just the reality of how violence permeates everything in this story.
It's a violent movie, and that's part of the point in a lot of ways.
Say more about that.
It shows how far the city is being pushed. Like we see it's natural that Joker is going to push in those horrific directions, right? But when we see the good guys push in that direction too as a reaction, that is hard. I mean, to watch. The physical violence that you see is very much there.
Yeah.
Everybody talks about the pencil scene where Joker essentially pushes a pencil into somebody's face. And there are elements of that throughout. But you're right, in terms of the blood that we actually see, it's not a huge amount. I think what makes it so visceral and so powerful and so painful is how real it feels. In a lot of superhero movies that we're used to, the violence can feel very cartoonish.
And sanitized.
Because of Christopher Nolan's vibe in this movie. It feels very real. And because we see some of the good guys doing things that we don't want to see them do, that becomes ever more painful.
And let me just say as a tangent, DC and Warner Brothers have tried to repackage
Yeah, it doesn't work.
the darkness here ever since, and none of it has worked.
Yeah.
Wonder Woman, I think, for my money, was the best post-Dark Knight DC superhero movie. And in some ways, it was the least dark.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And the most pure, although that's another conversation for another time.
Stay tuned.
Right? But it's almost like the lesson the studios learned was, oh, people like dark. And it's just gotten darker and darker and darker. But there's been a nuance of dealing with the reality of evil that's present in The
Right.
Dark Knight that I would say, and I'm making a generalization, has largely been missing from everything else that DC has done since then.
I would agree in part. You know, I think.
Well, I'll take that.
I do think that some of their efforts to turn Superman into a dark place. I'll be honest. The Zack Snyder superhero arcs, I did not like at all. And you had in the last one, you had this dream sequence where Superman turns evil, right? And you have Batman shooting people, from what I remember, and that is
Batman does not shoot people.
Batman does not shoot people. Wrong. But but I do think that in some ways, the character of Batman, at least this latest incarnation, allows these stories to go darker. Superman can't be dark.
Right.
Batman can be.
Which is why he's boring.
He's not boring. We should have another talk about that.
Right.
He's really cool. But Batman does allow these stories to go darker. And I actually thought the Batman, the latest movie with what's his face,
With the one guy from Twilight.
that one guy from Twilight, that was not bad. I thought that
Scanning.
was pretty all right.
Well, and it does a lot of the same things that The Dark Knight does.
Right.
So one of the conversation points, because we talk a lot at Plugged In about we want to be a catalyst for you to have conversations with your family. I think one of the catalysts or one of the conversations here is, what do we do with evil? Right?
Yes.
Because Batman has to decide, and others too, they're confronted by this character that's almost pure evil.
Yeah.
He delights in hurting people, right? Just 'cause. What do
He
we
is the purest embodiment of evil I have ever seen
Yeah.
on screen.
Yeah, I mean, well, that would be a different conversation.
It really
maybe not. But it forces us to grapple with that
Yeah.
in a way, again, that I'm not sure. Thanos doesn't make me think about that.
No.
Not like Joker does, right?
It is an interesting. The power of Joker, the power of Heath Ledger's Joker, is an interesting cultural study with how popular he became in the wake of The Dark Knight, and
Yeah.
we could go into that. There is a charisma
Yeah.
about his brand of evil, and embodied so charismatically
Well, hello, beautiful.
Yeah.
by Heath Ledger. We see the pull, we see the tug of abandoning all rules and just doing exactly what we want. That's an interesting theme, because when you look at Batman, going back to what I had talked about, Batman, he doesn't do hardly anything that he wants.
Right.
Even when he looks like he's having a good time as Bruce Wayne, it's not what he.
It's all an act.
It's all an act.
He does have the Lamborghini, though, and that's awesome.
The Lamborghini then. Much more subtle.
I would like to
But-
drive his Lamborghini.
But he does have this sacrificial sense to him. He dies, in some ways, you could argue that he dies literally to himself every night when he becomes Batman and goes out for the betterment of the city.
And yet,
And yet,
Joker's origin story,
yes.
which is another pain point, and it really explains, in some ways, how he kind of goes insane and loses it, or maybe doesn't go insane. Maybe that's too far, but in his attempt to relate to the pain and the suffering of somebody he loved. Do you want to tell that story?
Well, but see, here's the thing. This is the fascinating thing about the Heath Ledger Dark Knight Joker.
Okay.
So, throughout the history of Batman, Joker has had a number of different origin stories.
Okay.
It depends
Yes,
on
we're
the
talking about
comic.
this one particularly.
And here's the thing. In The Dark Knight, he has no origin story. We don't know what it's about
True,
because
but he talks about an important relationship that.
no. See,
No?
here's what he does. He
I
does
love
talk
being
about
this
it.
wrong.
You are so wrong. So when he says, he asks a number of characters, do you want to know how I got my scars?
Is it the scars? You want to know how I got them? You want to know how I got these scars? Do you know how I got these scars?
Yeah.
Two different stories.
He does tell two different stories.
Totally different
They
stories.
are totally different. I only believed one of them.
So you have these elements where the Joker, he becomes, why I say that he's the one of the most powerful embodiments of evil that we see on screen is because he is so chaotic. He is so random. He comes from the void. He is the embodiment of chaos. You don't know what he is. You don't know how he got to where he got to. And I think that brings the power to Heath Ledger's Joker.
Okay, well, I'm going to just ditch everything I was going to say about that. You've convinced me.
But I still think that's really an interesting thing about this, because we do sort of have to think about how do we grapple with that sort of evil. This is not someone who had a bad childhood
Right.
necessarily. This is not somebody who we can sympathize with, even though people all across the culture have sympathized with him. This is a person who wants to watch the world burn.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? How do we deal with that as a Christian when we're faced with that kind of evil? That's an interesting question, because we have rules, we
Right.
have values, we need to stick to those. And again, getting back to how we started off this conversation, that's the through line throughout this whole thing. What do you do to stop evil?
Right.
And what rules do you break?
Right. And what will you compromise? What will you sacrifice in both good and bad senses?
Yeah.
And not everybody makes it out alive here. I mean, I think that's the other thing is it's a movie and a story that allows us to feel the pain of what happens when evil is unchecked. And it does that on so many levels.
Yeah.
And even, well, I feel like there's a lot more that we could talk
Goodness
about here.
gracious.
I do think this is a movie that challenges us personally with all sorts of questions. You know, where would we compromise? If we experience something horrific, do we become like Harvey Dent because he loses somebody close to him? And I think it's safe to say it pushes him over the edge.
Yeah.
I mean, also getting half of his face burned off probably
Yeah,
helped
that
push
would-
him
that
over
would
the
do it.
edge.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of conversation to be had here.
There's a ton of conversation. And that's one of the things that we try to do here at Plugged In is encourage those types of conversation, because the stories that we embrace, the stories that we listen to, the stories that we watch, they are powerful. They can impact us very negatively, as we point out repeatedly in our reviews.
Yeah.
And this can be one of those stories. But there are some powerful, important themes to grapple with within so many of even these problematic movies.
Yeah.
And we would encourage you, if you have watched The Dark Knight, if you want to watch The Dark Knight, to think about these themes, to go out with your friends, to go out with your older kids and talk about what is at work within these stories. Because it's not just about what happens to Batman and Harvey Dent.
Right.
It's about what we choose to do every single day.
And that seems like an appropriate place to maybe flap our bat cape and land, right?
Yeah, I think so.
You
Right?
think so?
Yeah, why not? I mean, we could really talk for another 2 hours.
We
but
could, and we probably will, even after the cameras are off, because it's what we do, unless you need to go do work or something.
Work? No.
Well, as always, we would encourage you to like, comment, subscribe, ring that notification bell so that we can tell you, or YouTube can tell you, when we've got more videos like this coming. And we're going to keep doling some of these out because we enjoy talking with each other. We enjoy talking with you.
Yeah.
And we hope this is a catalyst for conversation with you and your family
Yeah.
and with us. So leave a comment. We want to hear what you have to think about The Dark Knight, about anything that we've had to say today about the themes and the things that we're unpacking. with regard to The Dark Knight in our conversation today.
Yeah, and honestly, if you don't like these videos, it doesn't matter because we do, and we will continue to talk like this
Right.
as much as someone allows us to.
That's right. Until they cut us off, we will be back for more. Thanks for joining us today. Darkness. No